offices as well as their some of their residential properties. So I will be filling in for Keith this afternoon. All right. Well, it's 2 minutes past the appointed hour, and we've got close to 20 folks on the call already, so I'll keep an eye on the waiting room, and perhaps we can get started just with some introductions. I know many of you are probably familiar with one another, but it always helps to put a name with a face, and I think we have perhaps some newer folks on the call. So I'm just gonna go down my list, and if folks can just provide a brief introduction, who you are, and if you're affiliated with an organization or community, just yeah, tell us who you are. So I'm gonna start with Bruce Smith. Bruce, welcome. Do you mind just providing an introduction? You're muted at the moment.
Hi, I'm Bruce Smith. I live in Westmoreland. I'm on the Westmoreland Town Planning Board meeting and look forward to this meeting.
Thanks, Bruce. Derek Scalia, welcome.
Thanks. Derek Scalia, Franklin Pierce University.
Great. Ed Merrill. You're muted, so you know. Ed, can you hear us? See if he's on video there. We'll swing back around to Ed. George Hansel, welcome. Mind just introducing yourself?
Hi, Todd. George Hansel, Mayor Keene. I'm also the board chair for Monadnock Economic Development Corps.
Great. James, do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, good afternoon all. James Weatherly, Southwest Region Planning Commission staff here.
Great, thanks, James. Janelle, welcome. I should note that Janelle is a new member, a new official member to the Economic Development Advisory Committee. Hi, Janelle.
Hi, thank you for the welcome. Janelle Lawton, Rural Economic Development Administrator for the BEA.
Great. Jessica, welcome. Mind introducing yourself?
Hi there, I'm Jessica Gelter. I live in Brattleboro, but I work at Arts Alive, which is a arts and business services organization that serves the entire Monadnock region and bordering towns. I'm also a select board member in Brattleboro.
Great, welcome, Jessica. Julie, nice to see you again. You mind introducing yourself?
Julie Schozell. I'm with the Greater Keene and Peterborough Chamber.
Great. Margaret Shara, welcome. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Hey, good afternoon. Margaret Shara, Town of Winchester, Land Use Administrator, Code Enforcement, and Economic Development.
Great. Thanks, Margaret. Matthew, welcome.
Hi, Todd. Matthew Bachler, Town of Swansea. I'm the Director of Planning and Economic Development.
Mike Remy, welcome. Are you, can you hear us?
Oh yeah, I can hear you.
Great.
Sorry for not going on video. Mike Remy, City Councilor for the City of Keene, as well as Planning Board. Day job is CNS Wholesale Grocers. You'll hear me frequently talk about Keene Young Professionals Network, though. So that's the other one.
Great, thanks, Mike. Michelle Coda, welcome. You mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, no problem. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michelle Cota. I work for Senator Shaheen on our state policy team, looking after business, broadband, economic development areas. So great to see you.
Great. Thanks for being with us, Michelle. Michelle Talwani, welcome. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm the Director of Community Relations for the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund and happy to be participating today.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. Bobby Graham, welcome.
Yeah, hi everyone. Bobby Graham here from the Office of Senator Maggie Hassan. I also, like Michelle, work on everything business, economic development, broadband related for the senator here in the state of New Hampshire. I'm based out of the Portsmouth office.
Great. Welcome, Bobby. Scott Young, welcome. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Hey, Todd. Hello, everyone. Scott Young with Mascoma Bank, and I manage all the branch operations as well as the operations that support them. So good to see everyone.
Great. Thanks, Scott. Teresa Pinto, welcome.
Oh, thanks, Todd. Yes, I'm Teresa Pinto. I work for the state of New Hampshire in the Business and Economic Affairs Office as a business resource specialist, focused primarily on Hillsborough, Merrimack, Stratford, and Rockingham counties.
Great. Thanks, Teresa. Let's see. Tim, do you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Let me yield to Ed Merrill since I see he is unmuted, and let him introduce himself and I'll follow.
Okay, Ed Merrill from the Jaffrey Planning Board and Jaffrey Economic Development.
Great. Thanks, Ed. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tim Murphy, and along with Todd and James, I'm with the staff of the Southwest Region Planning Commission.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Varden, I see you just came on the call. Welcome. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Yep. Hi, everybody. This is Varden Bajpai. I work with Small Business Development Center, and the group that I work with is the Southern region. We just had a reorg within organizations. So previously we had 6 regions that we looked at. Now we've divided into 3, and the regions have grown. So we now have different teams that we work with. So I'm still responsible for Keene, all the way to Merrimack.
Great. Thanks, Varden. Warren Haggerty, SBA, do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Warren Haggerty with the Small Business Administration. I'm an economic development specialist, and I cover the Keene and Monadnock area.
Great. Thanks, Warren.
Thank you.
Let's see. My participant list is jumping around here a little bit, but I see David Hansel with Filtrine. Do you mind introducing yourself? Maybe David has stepped away for a moment. Just seeing if there's anyone else that I'm missing. I know Liz LaRose from Monadnock United Way is on the call. I just got a message from her that she's finishing up attending to other matters. So welcome, Liz, to the call. Hopefully you can jump in later along. Oh, I see you've unmuted yourself. So
yep.
You're at least
Thank you,
listening
Todd.
with one ear.
I'm listening with one ear. Not my apologies. I'm glad to be joining this group, but we are finishing up campaign. So I'll be working in the background, and Mike Remy happens to wear another hat, which is being a board member, and he's given me the thumbs up that he'll get me up to speed on anything I'm missing. So I will have this on in the background, but apologies, I won't be as involved as typically. Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Liz. And David Hansel, I see you unmuted yourself. Feel free to introduce yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. I'm joining the meeting to get some ideas for how to get people to work. I work with Filtrine Manufacturing in Keene. And I think we all are dealing with a lot of similar problems when it comes to figuring out how to get the workforce here in Keene to work. So that's why I joined this meeting.
Great. Well, welcome, David. Glad you're here. Let's see, I'm looking and I'm seeing that Veronica Rosa from Keene State College is just hopping on the call. Not to put you on the spot, Veronica, but we are going around doing introductions, and I should note that Veronica is also a newer member of the EDAC, so welcome, Veronica.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Great.
Did you need me to say anything? Was there anything? Sorry, I didn't
Nope,
get to hear
we're
anyone
just,
else.
yeah, we're just saying hello. So just glad you're here with us. Great. And I think just rounding out the list of attendees, I wanted to recognize David Cohen from the U.S. Economic Development Administration. Today we're going to be talking primarily about our comprehensive economic development strategy, which is supported through a grant by the US EDA. And David, I'm wondering if you might be willing just to say a few words on who you are and perhaps how the SEDS process connects with the work of your agency. David, I see you're unmuted, but I can't hear you.
He seems to be frozen. I know it's cold out, but yeah, it's possible that his internet connectivity is not functioning properly.
All right. Well, if David is able to connect later on in the discussion, we can provide him a few moments just to introduce himself. But I should just say we're glad to be working with US EDA on this project, the development of the comprehensive economic development strategy. Oh, I see David is trying to rejoin here. And I just to continue, we're glad to be working with the EDA on not only development of a new SEDS, but some other economic development related activities spanning from broadband technical assistance to workforce development. Some of you may have been on the call earlier this morning. We organized a session on workforce, which I shared the meeting information with you all earlier this morning. And David, I see your video back on the screen. So I'm wondering if you might just be able to provide a brief introduction, who you are, your role at US EDA, and the connection between the SEDS and the work of your agency.
Great, thank you. And I apologize for technology disruptions. A little bit of background and context. I'm glad to be here today, and we're working with Todd and also Tim and their team on the SEDS in terms of providing a grant to help provide for the development of the SEDS. And we view the SEDS and SEDS in general as being valuable to really guide and develop a vision for a region, and then to connect that to opportunities to actually implement, both in terms of funding from EDA possibly, and also other federal agencies, and also from other sources going forward. So we view the process of developing a SEDS as a very critical aspect of determining the future direction for a region and guiding a region going forward, and then having the SEDS being a viable breathing document to move forward to implement. I know some of you for some other calls as well. Briefly, I work out of the Philadelphia office. We're still working remotely, and I work with Alan Brigham remotely, who some of you might know. I'm doing work in 5 states, including New Hampshire. I started work under CARES projects, now doing a lot of work under ARPA projects. And again, very happy to be here today, connect with people. And I may have to drop off at some point. We're very busy reviewing and working on applicants and reviewing applications for ARPA projects, but glad to be here today. And I'm sure it will be very successful, and look forward to seeing the SEDS be developed. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Yeah, and I just want to reiterate, David's been a great partner, very helpful in getting us off the ground with this project. And And I see one more attendee's joined us. I thought I saw Danica Malone come up on my participant list. Danica's a new member of the EDAC. Danica, we're just finishing up introductions. If you're able to, could you just provide a brief introduction?
Yeah, hi everyone. Sorry I joined a little late today. My name is Danica Malone. I work for the town of Peterborough. I'm the director of the Office of Planning and Building, and I operate as the town planner here. In years past, I used to work for North Country Council, which is the northernmost regional planning commission, and I worked on the SEDS up there as well.
Great, welcome Danica.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, so if I missed anyone, feel free to speak up now. Otherwise, we're gonna jump into our agenda for the day, which is going to focus on the SEDS. Great, so I think I got everyone. Before actually we jump into talking about today's discussion, I just wanted to provide a brief recap of the October meeting. We kicked off a discussion about the SEDS at that meeting, and we conducted a group SWOT analysis of sorts, a simplified SWOT analysis where we identified aspects of economic development in the region that are really strengths that we should be building on, challenges that may need attention and a concerted effort to overcome. And we got started having a discussion about what's next for economic development in the region. So programs and initiatives that are on the horizon for different communities and organizations in our region. Just to summarize real quickly, some of the strengths that were mentioned were some of our kind of key economic development organizations like Hannah Grimes, Medic, and Keene State College is also cited as a really important anchor institution. Really strong partnerships with state agencies and other aspects of collaboration and coordination kind of popped out as a strength. Some of the challenges, housing is a recurrent theme in conversations, transportation, the lack of different options, workforce, as I think David mentioned, it was a motivation for his attendance today. That was cited as a challenge. Some spreading information about what's going on in the region was cited as a challenge. So we really just got started with that conversation. It was a good starting point though, and I think a good foundation for today's conversation, which is going to focus on three aspects of the SEDS development, which, as we referenced on at our last meeting, we're marketing under the banner of Our Economy, a strategy for Southwest New Hampshire. One of the goals of the SEDS process this time around is to make it a little bit more publicly accessible, engaging. For most of us on the call, we're at least somewhat well-versed in the terminology, so SEDS might not seem, that acronym might not seem too confusing, but in terms of reaching out to a wider audience, which is a real goal of the project this time around, we're using the banner of Our Economy, a strategy for Southwest New Hampshire. So today we wanted to focus on three things. We wanted to give you a brief update of some of the data analysis that staff have been occupied with over the past couple months. Still a work in progress, but some interesting findings already coming out of that work. Then we'll get into a discussion about goals and objectives, which is really a central piece of the SEDS process. And then time permitting, we'll get started at least with the conversation about priority projects, the process that we could use to approach that aspect of SEDS development. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, James Weatherly, who's been really focusing on the data analysis piece of things. James, I don't know if I could, at this point, turn it over to you. I think I think you should be able to share your screen, and I think you had some slides and initial findings at least, to share with the group.
Awesome. Thank you, Todd, and good afternoon, all. Let me see, I'll put this into presentation mode. Are you able to see my screen okay?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes. I think I'm seeing the data page. Yep.
Okay,
yep.
there we go.
Yep.
Excellent. Excellent.
Perfect.
Well, great. Well, good afternoon, all. As Todd mentioned, I have been working with Todd and the project team to do a lot of the data collection and analysis. And so hopefully this afternoon, just hoping to provide a little bit of update on some of the findings and also our process and how we've distributed a lot of our data analysis work. What I'll say is that I encourage folks to post in the chat. And Todd, if there are questions at the end, I'll take a look at the chat and we can address those at the end. But feel free to type your questions as I'm going through some of these data points. So kind of a really quick overview of some of the project goals that we're approaching this Our Economy project with. Really 3 overarching goals. The first is building a shared knowledge and understanding of our regional economy. Setting goals, which is also another item we'll be talking about this afternoon, but also taking action in terms of identifying priority projects, engaging with stakeholders, and setting folks around the region up for implementation of some of the goals and objectives that we established through this process. This data collection is obviously on this first goal of building knowledge. And while we're focusing on quantitative data collection for this presentation, I'd also mention that we are also doing quite a bit of qualitative outreach as well through interviews and focus groups with quite a number of stakeholders throughout the region. And that work is ongoing. I put this slide in here kind of to give folks an overview of how we're presenting a lot of this data. I put the URL at the top of this slide, but this is on the project website, oureconomy.info. And what you're seeing here is essentially we've been structuring a lot of this data collection in terms of distribution, as in a blog format. And so we are really focusing on 1 or 2 indicators at a time, having staff do a couple of paragraphs of analysis and posting that indicator by indicator, blog post by blog post on this public facing website. In previous iterations, what has happened a lot is that it's kind of been a bit of a data dump at the end in one final product. And I think that this methodology kind of allows folks to check in with the project as we continue our data collection, and also hopefully be able to kind of look at some of the key trends in a more digestible format. So diving into some of our findings so far, starting first here with really on just overall population change. And so you'll see at the kind of the edge here, we've been creating visualizations for each one of these data indicators as well. And what I really want to go over in terms of finding with population change is that while Southwest New Hampshire and Cheshire County did face a slight loss in population over the last decade, the important kind of thing to take away is that the region still has demonstrated quite a bit of resiliency because it's been a significantly smaller loss when compared to other rural communities throughout the country. In the face of really strong migration trends towards suburban and urban areas, the relative stability of our region's population is a sign of resiliency. And moreover, the data that we used, the 2020 census data we used to calculate this population change, did not include shifts that occurred actually during the COVID-19 pandemic. And so it does not include a lot of the some of the anecdotal accounts that folks have been seeing in terms of the real estate market and in other areas of in-migration to the region during the pandemic. Oh, sorry, wrong way there. There we go. So on to also in terms of demographic is another key finding that we saw is that Southwest New Hampshire is diversifying. A lot of our towns in our region have seen a doubling of the share of their population that identifies as either non-white or Hispanic Latino. And while the overall share of that population when compared to urban counties here in New Hampshire or other areas in New England is lower in terms of overall numbers, there's been a significant growth in terms of the population of those that identify as non-white or Hispanic Latino. This is a positive trend for a variety of reasons, and you can see this visualization if you go on the website, kind of breaks it down by community. But really, I wanted to include this as kind of a call to action and is described on the website of really understanding for our local business and government leaders, as well as leaders in the nonprofit sector, that Southwest New Hampshire is a place with growing diversity and that efforts to ensure inclusion and representation of diverse populations will be increasingly important as this trend continues. Shifting now to school enrollment. School enrollment can really be a controversial topic here in New Hampshire. Kind of the common narrative that people find is that higher school enrollments are a driver of property tax increases. But we also have to recognize that schools are really the heart of our region's communities, often for social capital as well as workforce needs. And throughout New Hampshire, enrollment in K through 12 schools have been decreasing over the past decade. This is from 2011 to 2020. And that decline is even more pronounced here in Southwest New Hampshire. We also provide kind of an overview by district, where some of our districts are particularly hard hit by decreases in school enrollment. And the reason that this is included and distributed in this project is not to provide a sense of doom and gloom, but to provide a call to action. The common narrative that folks provide about school enrollment driving property taxes, that there is going to be an influx of families of those residential developments, really is not being reflected in these trends. And so I think it's a call to action in terms of the housing market and housing conversation to make sure that for those who are interested in starting families and families who may be interested in relocating to the region, that we make sure that housing options are available to counter some of these trends of decrease in school enrollment. Just going through a couple more key findings here, and I see there's a couple of chats popping up, and I'll kind of get to those at the end, since I think we have about 10-15 minutes for this presentation. On post-secondary education, this is over the past decade, or past 20 years, there's been some significant gains that we found in terms of Cheshire and Sullivan counties for those with a high school diploma or greater, as well as those with a bachelor degree. And while Cheshire County lags behind other counties in terms of those with a bachelor's degree or higher, it has actually made up a deficit in those who have at least achieved a 2-year degree or an associate's level of education or higher. As well as there's been substantial gains in those who have less than a high school education, i.e. a lot more folks today have at least a high school education or greater as opposed to 20 years ago. And so that's some positive trends that we're seeing. Again, there's more analysis on the website that I encourage folks to take a look at. I know this is kind of whirlwind, but I encourage folks to take a look at the website to kind of dig into a lot of this more analysis. But on labor force participation, I know someone has already mentioned this statistic, but really this visualization you see here is a graph of labor force participation for those 16 and over the past decade or so, from 2010 to 2019. And this is really being shown in this presentation to make the point that although that labor has been highlighted during the COVID-19 pandemic as a significant concern for a lot of our regional employers, this is a long-term trend. Decreases in labor force participation has been going on for quite a number of years before the COVID-19 pandemic. And this graph does not take into account the changes that have occurred during the pandemic. And so it's important to know that a lot of the factors that may be driving labor force participation today have been in the works for quite a number of years and been impacting labor force in our region for quite a number of years. And finally, kind of the last point I wanted to point out is on infrastructure, and less of a targeted point here, but more just also providing that in terms of our data collection activities, it's not just statistics, but also geography as well. And so we've provided an overview of water, sewer, and three-phase power infrastructure across our region. And so, you know, I encourage folks to go to the website afterwards and take a look at kind of their community. The one note I'll make with this data source is that it's from a state agency, and there may be some gaps. So with both this infrastructure post as well as with other statistics that we went over as well, I encourage folks to take a look. And if you see things that don't necessarily line up with your local knowledge of your community, absolutely reach out to staff here at Southwest Region Planning Commission and let us know, because we want to make sure that our data collection efforts are really lining up to what folks understand the ground reality to be. And kind of my last slide here is next steps. So as Todd mentioned, a lot of data collection is ongoing. We're waiting on a lot of census data that is going to be delayed and released hopefully early this year. Currently, we are working on a shift share analysis for industries at a fairly granular level. You know, in terms of census data, housing analysis and age distribution are both two items that we're waiting on released census data for. And we're hoping to really finish up data collection towards the end of Q2 of this year. And so I see a couple of questions in chat. I really encourage folks, if they have anything else, either to reach out here in the chat or to reach out to the project team afterwards. And I can also have these slides sent around to folks.
Great, thanks, James.
Oh yeah.
Okay, were you, sorry to cut you off, it was, do you have anything else to wrap up with there?
Oh no, I was actually just going to kind of go through some of these questions that I'm seeing in the chat here.
Yeah, I'm also seeing some really great questions in the chat related to data, some of the details. I'll kind of leave it to you, James, to either follow up with folks in the chat dialogue or offline. We can also connect. I should note that, you know, one of the, well, first a quick caveat. James is pointing you to the data page of the site, and it was on my list to get all of these posts up on that page before the meeting just now, and I still haven't gotten around to that. So if you're going to that page looking for some of the data James referenced, it might not be up there quite yet. Hopefully by the end of the day we can get that squared away. I'll send a follow-up email with folks so that you have the latest and greatest. Also, you know, we really want this process in this project to be useful to our economic development partners. So if there are certain if there's certain data analyses that would be useful for your work, feel free to, I would encourage you to reach out to us and to have a discussion about what types of analysis might help inform decisions and planning within your community or organization. So just putting that offer out there on the table.
Hey, Todd, I got one. Can you hear me? It's Dave Hanson.
Yeah, David, go ahead.
I just had a question whether any of the data had been broken out by sector, you know, work, manufacturing versus service versus however, hospitality, however many sectors you want to bring up, but that may be helpful to see that maybe one sector is doing better than another or worse in some cases over the last 10 years.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll certainly be breaking out at least certain aspects of the analysis by sector. Certainly job growth comes to mind as something we'll be looking at by sector. If there are other metrics that would be useful to break out according to economic sector, let us know and we can take a look at what's possible on that front.
Okay.
Any other questions that folks want to articulate verbally before we move on to our next item? Great. Well, thank you again, James. Really interesting stuff. It's really helpful for us to just get our arms around what's happening, both long-term and shorter term in the regional economy. That's a big part of this project, is building understanding. So with that, I'm just going to share my screen here to get into the next piece of the agenda. Let's see, folks should be seeing the first slide of my deck here. We're going to be talking about goals and objectives is our next piece of the conversation. And I can, to a certain extent, look at my slides and the chat, but I might rely on my colleagues James and Tim to flag me down or stop me if questions come up while I'm talking here. So a big piece of the SEDS process is developing a framework of goals and objectives to guide economic development in the region. And I think it's worth, before we start looking at where we've come from and where we might head tomorrow in terms of goals and objectives, it's worth articulating why do they matter? What's the point of going through this exercise? And to my mind, there are a few key reasons that really justify the process. So the first is they help guide action on economic development issues. And that's something I really want to stress at the top of the conversation, is that the goals and objectives within the SEDS are really part of an action plan. They will help provide conceptual structure to specific economic development initiatives, strategies, and projects that help advance prosperity in the region. So really tying them to concrete on the ground action and helping to provide a framework for understanding how specific actions fit into an overarching context. The next reason that I think is important to highlight is they act as a map for regional collaboration. So when you think of the regional economy, that's a pretty abstract concept, right? It has a lot of different moving parts with a lot of different actors contributing in different ways. And for any one community or organization, it can be sometimes daunting or overwhelming to figure out what's the best way for me to plug in and contribute to advancing regional prosperity. And if we have a clear framework of goals and objectives that can help specific communities and organizations chart that out, and if goals and objectives are connected with specific actions that are spearheaded by specific organizations and communities, then it helps folks who might be newer to the table to figure out where they best fit in. And then another reason is they serve as a framework for identifying priority projects, and we'll talk about priority projects a little bit further on in the meeting. but basically the goals and objectives, they provide criteria. Yeah, I suppose that's the right word. Framework is probably a more accurate term to use here. They provide a good framework for technical assistance providers, funders, both within the region, across the state, and at the federal level. You heard David mention how the SEDS connects with the EDA's work. So the goals and objectives provide a framework for identifying priority projects and helping economic development partners, specifically technical assistance providers and funders, understand how a particular project supports economic development activities across the region. So that's the value proposition, or at least some of the elements of the value proposition. I always, when planning exercises, they can be abstract, they're long-term, so it's always worth reiterating to ourselves why it pays to go through this planning process. And I just threw a whole bunch of text on the screen. I should have phased that in a little bit more smoothly, but the focus of the conversation on goals and objectives today is first revisiting where we are or where we've come from. Some of the folks on the call are perhaps familiar with our existing SEDS, which was originally adopted back in 2005, and that had its own set of goals and objectives. And in the meeting packet that I shared with the meeting notice, I encouraged folks to revisit those goals and objectives that were adopted over 15 years ago. And on the screen here, I've summarized those goals and objectives, how they were articulated in that plan. And you'll note that some of the themes are similar to the ones that are top of mind today. First on the list, housing. That's still a challenge, even more so perhaps today than it was 15 years ago. Strengthening the economic base, maintaining a high quality labor force, infrastructure relevant to future development is another key area articulated in the existing SEDS. Business climate, regionalism, strengthening local government, and strengthening the quality of the healthcare system. This is how the goals and objectives were structured in that document that was adopted 15 years ago. So I thought it was worth just summarizing where we've come from, what might be similar, what might have changed, or start to think about what might have changed. This is a good reference point to start having that conversation. So with that in mind, the staff have started to synthesize some of the data analysis that we've conducted to date, some of the outreach that we've done through stakeholder interviews and focus groups, information that we've gleaned from just conversations through our daily work with economic development partners, and try to structure those themes in a way that is clear and will enable all of us to effectively communicate about the top priority areas for economic development in the region moving forward. So that's what you're seeing on the screen right now. We've tried to boil things down into a somewhat smaller list of top level goals. And I'm just going to run through those real quickly, and then we can open up the conversation with a few questions related to what you're seeing on the screen right now. So the first top category, and I'm using the word category because that's what these are. They're not articulated goals or objectives in a great level of detail. This is just about getting our arms around all the types of issues that we should be thinking about as we put a finer point on the goals and objectives within the SEDS. So sustaining our rural population, you heard James talk about how we've seen a modest amount of population loss over the last 10 years, maybe some shorter term gains since the 2020 census was released. But thinking about workforce and just sustaining our communities, the rural character and just a vibrant community life, we're going to need to attract and retain young people. Tourism is included under this category because one might argue that it is a good mechanism for attracting people who might be interested in setting down longer term roots in the region. That tourism functions as a gateway. And you heard James talk about how the region is diversifying. So we need to think about how do we make those folks feel welcome, make sure once they're here, they want to stay here. The next overarching category, physical infrastructure and transportation. I'm not going to get into this in a whole lot of detail. We can dig into this a bit more, but this is the bricks and mortar, the wires and pipes that enable our communities to flourish. We need to be thinking about the built environment as well as transportation. Social infrastructure. These are things that help support the social fabric of our communities. So things like childcare, education, public health, arts and culture. Economic mobility is really trying to get at this issue of really the American dream. If there are the pathways available to folks who might be born with limited means, ensuring that they have access to the tools they need to make sure that their kids have a leg up in the next generation, that they have opportunities at a greater level of economic security. And civic engagement, making sure residents and other stakeholders are engaged in the life of the community and the business of the municipalities in our region. Business infrastructure, I'm flying through these, trying to get to the discussion, so I'm not talking at you as much, but making sure that businesses have the supports and tools they need in order to thrive. We can dig into the various aspects listed here. I'll just mention the last bullet there, development of regional economic specializations. Is trying to highlight the fact that here in the Monadnock region, we do certain things really well. We have expertise in certain sectors, such as the high-end optics is something we're really proud of in our region, of having a lot of specialty. So making sure that we are nurturing those specialties in the future. And moving on to the last column here, sustainability, thinking both about agriculture, food systems, our working landscapes, making sure that this important piece of our economy, of our regional identity in many ways, it continues to thrive in the future. It's a very challenging sector of the economy to do well in. So certainly need to be thinking about that, or at least I would argue that we do. And climate mitigation and adaptation, calling that out explicitly, making sure that we're thinking about the long-term sustainability of the region and really looking beyond that. And then finally, wrapping up here, collective capacity and regional coordination. A real aim of the SEDS is to foster greater awareness about how we can be working together across municipal boundaries, across sectors of the economy. If any one of our organizations or towns tries to go it on their own, it's going to be a lot more difficult to achieve the work we want to complete by ourselves, as opposed to working with others. And then connected to that, if we're coordinating that, perhaps provides a platform for us to speak with a more unified voice at the state level and perhaps even at the federal level. I often hear that, our corner of the state doesn't get as much attention as it deserves at the State House. Maybe there's opportunity for us to coordinate more effectively as a region so that we can advocate for ourselves and for rural interests at higher levels of government. So, that was a lot. And I'll pause there, and I'm just going to advance to the next slide here to kick off conversation, because I have a couple of questions, and then I can flip back and open up the floor. But really, I wanted the exercise today to focus on two questions. One is, what do you think about this proposed framework and the categories contained within? Does it capture all of the top issues that we should be thinking about as a region? Is it an effective way of communicating about all of these issues? So those are two connected questions that I wanted to pose to the group first. And then following up on that, if we have time, looking at this proposed framework, maybe there are specific actions or strategies that we should be including under these categories. So there's a kind of the next layer of the hierarchy is working from goals at the top, getting a bit more specific with the objectives, and then looking at specific strategies of how we put these into action on the ground. So that's the next step in the conversation. Perhaps we can start brainstorming different strategies that we should be considering and how they fit into this framework or the framework as it develops through conversation with you all and others. So I'm going to flip back to the previous slide here because it might be helpful to reference. But I'm wondering, just opening up the floor here, if I haven't lost too many of you with my somewhat long-winded spiel, whether, if there are any gut reactions to how these different goals and objectives are structured, if there are any kind of background or clarifying questions as to the purpose of the goals and objectives, I'm happy to cover those or respond to those as well. So I'll open up to the floor at this point. Just to make sure that I'm hearing from as many of you as possible, I may ask you specifically for your input. If you don't have any input when I call on you, it's not a pop quiz. Feel free to pass, but I just want to make sure that that we're incorporating as many of your perspectives as possible. So with that, I'll open up the floor to any initial reactions.
Hey, Todd, Tim here. If I could jump in, and at the risk of putting him on the spot, but if you want to call on Matthew Bockler, you're going to have to call on him quick because he's got another meeting to get to. I know I would value his reaction. And for those who don't know, Matthew, who's been serving on this Economic Development Advisory Committee, is going to be moving on to a new opportunity after providing lots of good leadership in the town of Swansea and moving that community forward with its community and economic development activities. But he's not going far. So anyway, we'll be able to stay in touch with Matthew. But anyway, before he leaves, if we want to hear from him, now's the time.
Thanks, Tim. And for those who don't know, going to be starting a new position with the Wyndham Regional Commission in Brattleboro, so not very far away at all, and looking forward to continuing to work with you across the Connecticut River going forward. I have to, as Tim mentioned, I have to take off at 2, so I appreciate the chance just to jump in. Just my initial reaction, I think these categories look really good. I'll say I really appreciate the emphasis that you are placing on social infrastructure. I think that's often kind of neglected when it comes to economic development strategies. And I think a lot of that, the stuff underneath social infrastructure that provides a lot of support for the overall broader economy, and people often miss that. I think one thing I saw just looking through this is, while I understand why housing is under physical infrastructure, I wonder if that should be moved to social infrastructure. And I say that largely because I feel like for funding opportunities, housing is often more lumped together with social infrastructure versus physical infrastructure and transportation. That's just kind of an initial thought I had. But that's all I had. I think it looks good. I think it's a good direction you're going in.
Thanks, Matthew. Yeah, and you'll be nearby, but your presence in the region will definitely be missed. So thanks for those comments. And yeah, I mean, with social infrastructure, I think we're with the pandemic and how things like childcare are their connection with parents' ability to stay or re-enter the workforce, that's become painfully clear right at this point. So thanks for those comments. I'm wondering if anyone else has any initial reactions.
This is Dave Hansel again. The one thing I don't see in there is anything to do with the higher education. I think we should focus on retaining the college graduates from New Hampshire to work in New Hampshire. And one of the only ways you probably do that is put business and the colleges together to work out a plan where the students work in the field and learn some trades and other skills before they graduate. I know that that's pretty common in cities, and those areas where you take a semester off and work off campus, and that qualifies as a almost a course or a credit for a course. Anyway, maybe that should be added somewhere under business infrastructure or one of those.
Yeah, David, thanks for that comment. And it's a very timely one. We just had, the chamber just hosted a meeting this morning focusing on that very issue of how institutions of higher education in the region are currently partnering with regional employers and how those connections could perhaps be improved moving forward. And I think there are some very specific action items that came out of that discussion that I could see incorporating into this framework, perhaps as its own category under business infrastructure, or perhaps as specific action items related to workforce. There's lots of ways you could organize the different issues and activity areas, but yeah, I would tend to agree with your sentiment that would be important to highlight somehow in this framework.
Right.
If I could jump in too, as a representative of Keene State, I think I shared at the last meeting, but I might be mixing it up with the chamber meeting, so bear with me. It was in regards to our comprehensive campaign that we're moving into at the college. We're going to be raising 20 to 25 million for the college in the near future, and a key focus area will be helping position our students to be work ready when they graduate. One major piece of that is aligning with businesses to provide internship opportunities for our students, and have conversations with some of the local or not regional businesses as well about job opportunities, apprenticeship opportunities, and loan forgiveness structures, things like that, to help retain the talent in the region. So I just wanted to share that workforce development and internships is a key focus for our campaign, because we do understand it's a challenge here, and we want to make sure we're graduating students that are ready to stay if we're able to get them to stay, and to make sure they have the experience they need to secure a job and be a viable contributor. So I just want to make sure everybody was aware of that as well. So I would echo that if we could pop it out and carve it out here, that would be fantastic.
Great. Thanks for sharing that exciting news, Veronica. I think I might have heard some hint of what you're talking about secondhand, but it seems like a really exciting initiative. And I think the SEDS process that we're going through is a fantastic opportunity to promote that work at Keene State and help highlight how other economic development partners might be able to support and connect with that work. So that's exactly the type of initiative, project, strategy that we are looking to elevate through the SEDS process. So thanks for sharing.
You know, if I could just talk just a little bit about internships as well, because I think that that is a great connection to attracting young people by collaborating with the institutions of higher learning here in the region, that the internships should be paid internships. You know, as we're committed to economic justice and understanding that diverse backgrounds and experiences, the idea of unpaid internships is an inequity for so many students. So, and it's a way in which we attract young people to stay in the area because we see them and we acknowledge them and support them.
Great, thanks for highlighting that, Derek. Yeah, certainly how we structure internship opportunities, it will affect who is able to take advantage of those opportunities to explore career opportunities in our region. So thank you.
If I could comment.
Sure.
We're faced with an aging population, so retaining and attracting young people is extremely important. But I think that one of the problems in retaining young people is the housing situation. We have a problem of extremely expensive real estate that the young people can't afford, and same thing applies to rental property as well as purchasing. And I'm thinking that perhaps business ought to tie in with the real estate people to see what can be done to provide housing for young people, which is critical to the economic development in this area.
Thanks, Ed. I don't know how others feel, but I know this is a common refrain that housing is a key element. It's a key pinch point in terms of our ability to attract and retain young people. And there are a lot of groups who are paying increased attention to this issue. So hopefully the SEDS can be a place to help highlight those various efforts and help connect those efforts with resources and maybe funding to move the ball forward. Any other initial reactions? I'm hearing, so far I'm hearing maybe some adjustments to how things are organized, how we call out certain categories that are referenced here. I'm not hearing any glaring omissions at this point, but I encourage you to try to you're not going to hurt my feelings if something is gone astray from your perspective. Really, this is just meant as a starting point for discussion.
I have a couple questions or thoughts. This is Julie again. I'm with the chamber, and the project that I work on, as many of you know, is the Branding Monadnock project and promoting the region with the goal of essentially attracting young people to the region. So I guess my question would be, are these sort of analyzed through a timeline, right? Like, so we know that the diverse communities are growing faster than any other. So is the idea that we would be in contact with those who are here now and to find out how to continue to throw some, to accelerate that going further? Because I don't really understand why that's happening, and that would be helpful to know why that is the fastest growing group currently. And then I guess my next thought is around timeline, and particular with not losing young people. I think if you look at 8th graders right now, 7th graders and people of that age, in a pandemic, no less, they're sort of looking around and thinking about what it's like to live here, what it's like to raise a family here. Is it a good experience? Is it not a great experience? And I think if you see how easy or how hard it is for your parents, it really sort of is where you start to develop the story of, this is where I want to raise my family, or there's nothing here for me, kind of situation. So, I would be looking at sort of wondering what the timeline is for each goal, like what can happen in the next 5 years, what's going to take longer, or that sort of thing is just one thing I'm thinking when I look at this. I think the objectives and the goals are great. I mean, I think you really hit the nail on the head. But for me, it's just more about time and where do we put more of our energy first?
Yeah, it's a great question, Julie. And as I described at the kind of the top of the discussion on this, connecting these different categories of goals and objectives to specific actions has to be, it's an important next step. We don't want these goals and objectives just floating out there, disconnected from actual action on the ground. We really want to make sure that we're tying them to specific programs, initiatives, projects, and identifying who is leading those various initiatives, strategies, projects. What is the target timeline? I think it's important to have a variety of projects operating at different timelines, just to maintain a sense of momentum, right? There's the low-hanging fruit that we should be looking at to accomplish maybe over a 12-month period, and maybe there are longer term projects that will take 5 years to undertake. We're not quite there yet in the process, but as these goals and objectives take clearer shape into an action plan, identifying specific activities, who's in charge, what the timeline is, what sort of resources they would need in order to complete those activities. That's a really important part of the process. We're just not quite there yet, but it's something we should be thinking about at all times in the back of our mind as we think about these, how to structure the goals and objectives. Did I answer? I think I may have answered part of your question, but if I didn't answer,
No, I think you did. That is helpful for me to know. And then, one thing that comes up sometimes when I'm talking about the project that I'm working on is the housing piece always comes up, and rightfully so. And then also trying to understand the housing situation, because I talk in particular about how we aren't keeping a young workforce, but it's like, why are we running out of housing? which I realize is related to the aging population and things like that. There's just people who stay longer, but they're no longer in the workforce. But it is a piece that I do get I get asked, and I, down the road would love a way to articulate a little bit better, because it is an interesting question. It's like, we're talking about housing is a problem, but we're also talking about how we don't have enough people. Like, we're losing people. And so what is happening with the housing? It seems like it's a strange issue.
Yeah. So that is a whole conversation, and perhaps kind of a lower, lighter lift in terms of an action item on that front is simply equipping folks like yourself with the talking points to communicate effectively on this topic, whether it's just like a 2-page synopsis on why are we facing a housing crisis.
Right. Yeah.
And you bring up a good point. We're according to the census, we're losing people, and yet we have a housing challenge, and that's due to a number of factors. One is that the average household size is shrinking. So even though we have population is flat or slightly declining, that population is distributed among a greater number of smaller households. So we have, in many cases, households that are much small, households living in homes that are much bigger than they need. So that's part of the issue. I can make speculation as to other aspects of why that is, but I should mention here at the Planning Commission, we are in the process of conducting a more detailed housing needs analysis. So we'll have kind of data, the data to back up some of the, instead of me just kind of speculating offhand,
right,
I might wait until we,
right. Sort of, but it would be nice to have like a real understanding, and the talking points would be great. I don't need to take any more time, but that would be helpful.
Great. Thanks, Julie.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're actually at 2:15, and I had us targeting 2:30 to wrap up here. So some really great feedback so far. Any other thoughts on the framework as proposed here? Happy to receive any kind of wrap-up comments now, or you can always feel free to contact me offline to have a more in-depth conversation.
Hey, Todd, this is Margaret in Winchester.
Hi, Margaret.
And hi there. I really like what you drafted up. I think it's a great job. I like the additional part about the collective collaboration, sharing resources, people, equipment, and services. I think part of that sharing, why we are very lucky today and in many of the other EDAC meetings to have representative from our federal government here, assisting us and giving us ideas and ideas to programs. But when I look at the social infrastructure, I have concerns why I totally agree with what's written there. Some of that is out of our control. Some of that comes down to our state legislature. And by no means am I trying to be political, but a lot of what they do affect what we think are goals and necessities to make our economy and just our lifestyle here in Cheshire County better. And so I'm almost thinking that we need to be aware of, to bring in, I don't even know if I want to say bring in state representatives, but I think you know where I'm going. we need their help by some of the laws and the different things they've passed or considering passing are really going to affect our social infrastructure. And I just think that we need to think about that. And again, I'm not quite sure how to articulate that and how to put that into this conversation. So I kind of wanted to throw that out there.
Hey, Todd, Tim here. Can I jump in on Margaret's point, which I think is a great one?
Go ahead.
You're bringing the planner out in me, Margaret. So I apologize up front. But basically, though, I guess what I want to say, and I think this gets a little to Julie's point as well, is we should be looking at this framework of goals and objectives as the basis for us to make progress over time. And I think Todd was explaining it some as well, is that if we can articulate those topics and subject matter areas in which we feel are critical to our success and our long-term economic viability, that's what we want. We want to capture those categories here, whether they're the goals, which are the each colored section, or the objectives, which are the individual bulleted items under those colored sections. Because as we move forward in the process, what we're going to be able to do is define strategies and or actions, things that we can do that, to Julie's question, can have timelines associated with them, also indicate individuals who would be involved, which gets a little to what you're saying, Margaret. If we need legislative reform, then we bring in those people. So if the issue happens to be, you picked social infrastructure, childcare, and if we feel we need some legislative reform and we need it fast, then we bring those people to the table so that we can get their help in making some progress. And if it has to be fast, to Julie's point, we can say that this is something that has a short term rather than a mid or long term time horizon to it. So I guess what I would ask us to do at this point, and again, I apologize for the process side of being a planner, and that is are we identifying the correct subject matter areas that are critical to our future success from economic progress and prosperity, and knowing that we're going to have the opportunity to get more detailed, to identify strategies and activities and establish timelines. I don't know if that helps, but
it does. Thank you, Tim. And again, I really like what I see in front of me. I think Todd did a fantastic job and all involved. And I totally agree. I just had concerns on how to address those objectives. And you did help clarify that. Thank you.
Yeah, so what Todd's pleading with us on is, what did I leave out, or what's not here? Whether now or as he invites some feedback offline.
Tim, I'd like to point out a few things here as well, Todd, if you allow me.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Barty.
I think this exercise is awesome. You've done a really good job putting these things together. But one thing I'll definitely ask to focus on is to understand kind of interdependencies of these things, right? Because what happens is that when we take, there could be an overarching goal, but many of those goals that we think are goals are actually more so an action item to accomplish a certain goal, right? So, for example, education. Education has an impact on attracting and retaining young people, right? So how these are interdependent goals. You cannot have one without the other, right? Another thing is, say, broadband. Yes, broadband has an impact on having young people around. So how is, these are all, can we look at it in a way of a interconnected system and understand, maybe assign some weightage to it towards each other and understand what comes before the other one. We can't, we'll be spreading ourselves too thin if we could try to attack all these problems at the same time. But by understanding the interdependencies of these and hopefully putting some weightage around it, is we not only will understand like how how to prioritize them, but also what are the objectives what are actual goals, and what are things that, as you were saying, that, can be done in the long term and can be done today, but we start to impact them today. So that exercise need to happen on interdependencies of these. I'm pretty sure not everything can be done in the next 5 years, right? 200%. But if we understand that dependency, we start to move the needle.
Varden, thanks for that. Thanks for that comment. I think it's a really important one to keep in mind. Yes, we have a kind of a tidy list of bulleted points up on the screen, but it's really more of a web, right? It's where they're all connected to with one another. Some are more tightly linked than others, and some represent kind of a choke point that might be preventing other areas, or preventing progress in other areas that we might care about. So I don't know if I have a clear-cut approach or response to your comment right off the back here, but it's something that I think is worth keeping close in mind as we develop these further. So thank you for that. So just in the interest of time, I did have another piece of this conversation looking beyond the goals and objectives to identifying priority projects and laying out some elements of what that process could look like. Since we don't really have time to dig into that today, what I'll do is follow up with folks via email to describe what that process could look like, what are priority projects, and how they connect with the SEDS. Really, just shortly, the priority projects is kind of, to my mind, one of the really fun parts of this process. It's an opportunity to identify and highlight what's already happening within our communities, what might not be happening yet, but might be percolating as an idea that just needs a bit of support, whether that's technical assistance, maybe it's funding, maybe it's just an opportunity to brainstorm. The projects could range from, multi-million infrastructure projects to a smaller community event that might be important for advancing prosperity in a particular town. So again, it's kind of a opportunity to celebrate and support projects in the region, position them for funding and implementation, and maybe I'll just leave it there as a teaser for a conversation that I'll kick off via email after this meeting. So stay tuned on that front. Just introduce a modest amount of suspense to the process here. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. And just to wrap up in the last few minutes here, want to open it up to the floor for partner updates. We try to carve out a few minutes at each meeting. If anyone on the line has an event, a program, initiative in your community or organization happening right now or in the near future, now's a good time to let the group know about it.
If no one else will go, I have at least Taste of Keene, which the Keene Young Professionals Network held last year, will be happening again this year on June 4th. So anybody interested in getting involved, please reach out.
Such a great event, and it was great in partnership with the Art Walk, which is also that week. I wanted to put in a plug for a couple of things. First, we're inviting a design team to come down and look at the Arts Corridor project in downtown Keene, February 22nd to 24th. We're launching results of a study that we did on arts and loneliness and arts impact on public health. That'll be coming out very soon. We're going to be doing the Arts and Economic Prosperity Study again, which looks at the nonprofit arts venues' economic impact on our small towns and economies. We're not sure when they're going to start because of COVID. It was slated for March, so it may be more like the spring, summer before that gets underway. Yeah, those are the 3 things.
Thanks, Jess. Lots of exciting stuff. I know our Hannah Grimes Center partners aren't able to be with us today because of some competing programming, but I just want to plug the Radically Rural roundtables that are occurring, I believe, on a monthly basis. They've done a really good job of turning a weekend summit into year-round programming aimed at highlighting exciting approaches and initiatives that advance rural living, things that are exciting about living in a rural community. And they have a couple of upcoming events. One is on February 9th that will focus on the connections between accessibility and entrepreneurship and business. So helping communities and businesses understand how they can be more welcoming to individuals with disabilities and providing universal access to their businesses or institutions. And then there's a event on March 9th focused on rural childcare. So a couple of really timely events, I think, connected with some of the issues we're talking about today. So I'll just drop the link to that in the chat if you're interested in checking it out. Any other final thoughts or things folks want to share before we hop off here?
I could share a real quick update from SBA.
Sure.
Sure. So as most of you may be aware of, we no longer accepting applications for the EIDL program that has ended as of December 31st. However, if any businesses have been in the process to getting the loan and they're trying to, they're still in the process, they will be, gone through and will be completed. So they don't get automatically shut off. So just so you're aware of that. SBA still has all of our guaranteed loan programs that are always available. So there is money out there. Those loans are made through lenders, whether it be a commercial lender or a credit union. So they are still available for small business owners. The other thing I did want to mention, on February 23rd and 24th, we have a program called Boots to Business. It's a 2-day long, very intensive entrepreneurial program for veterans, active service members, spouses, or guardsmen and women. So please, if you know anybody that fits that mode and would be interested in sitting in on that, it is free of charge. It's being done virtually, so it's fairly easy to attend. Please have them go over to the New Hampshire Small Business website, and they can register there. Thank you.
Thanks, Warren. All right, well, we've reached 2:30, and I recognizing you all are busy people. I'll wrap things up there. Our next meeting is scheduled for April, the second Wednesday, which is April 13th. I will send out a calendar invite so that you can put that on your schedule. And I'll be in touch with a follow-up email to cover some of the parts of the conversation we didn't get to during the meeting today. So thank you again, everyone, for taking the time. Lots of good conversation. Hope you enjoyed the discussion, and Stay warm.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.